Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur. I hope that you're doing well. I've seen the Codex Cantina posting about Japanese June, so I thought I'd reread Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World by Haruki Murakami, and I enjoyed it. It's probably my favorite of the Murakami books I've read, and it fits into his surrealist, exploring human consciousness books, which are probably my favorites. And then I would put his existentialist mysteries that feel like Paul Auster with pop culture, and then his realistic novels I find are more miss than hit. I'm not a huge fan of those. But this, along with his short stories, I think this would be a good gateway into Murakami's writing if you're interested. This is a book that explores human consciousness to a very high degree. Our main character, our narrator, the first person I, which is very common across Murakami's books, the first person I, this is published in the 1990s, but he's working with data. He's sort of his mind acts as an encryption device. So he takes data, he shuffles it, and then can return the data, and it's essentially been encrypted. And so that's sort of our window into that consciousness. And the book is going to explore ideas around human consciousness, around human memory, around time, around how our memory and our consciousness exist in time or outside of time, around the ways in which the human mind is similar to a computer, the ways in which a computer mimics the mind or cannot mimic the mind. And so all of these are ideas that he's exploring in a way that is fairly readable, fairly accessible. But it's Murakami, so it's not just that. It's wrapped up in this weird conspiracy and mystery. The unnamed narrator, after shuffling this data, then has his apartment, destroyed. He's pursued by some people. He initially meets up with the guy he's doing this secret data shuffle with deep underground. There are monsters that are, we never actually see. They're just described and scary. So all of that's going on. And we have the Murakami pop culture side, where we get references to Hollywood, we get references to music from the 1960s, and there's that aspect of Murakami where his writing can be the hysterical realism school, sort of post-Pynchon, pre-David Foster Wallace, where we need to know not just what music the protagonist is listening to, but what kind of car he's driving, what type of shirt and jacket he's wearing at the climax of the novel. These are all essential pieces of information, and that's happening. Within the end of the world half of the narrative, we have the strange surrealism. We have a character who's in an almost Kafka-Esque town. It feels very much informed by the Before the Law parable from the trial, but also from the castle. So a character shows up, again unnamed, first person I, shows up at a town, at a wall, and there's one gate. And the gatekeeper lets him in this time. Unlike Before the Law, lets him in, but now it seems that he can't get out. Now that he's in the town, he's part of the town, he will be in the town forever. Everybody who has been there feels like they've always been there. They have no sense of memory. They don't even necessarily have names. There's the librarian, the colonel, the gatekeeper. Our I is referred to as the dream reader. So all of these Kafka surrealist moments exist, and the narratives parallel each other, and eventually it becomes more and more clear how they are related to each other, how Hard-Boiled Wonderland and The End of the World exist as one book. But for me, I find the reading in The End of the World to be a little bit more interesting than the Hard-Boiled Wonderland section. And I don't know if it's the technology, the limitations of 1990s technology, or that the protagonist of Hard-Boiled Wonderland has the fatal flaw of some of Murakami's better works. And that is the incessant need to constantly evaluate women from his desires. There's one character who he refers to dozens of times as the Chubby Girl. And he's evaluating would he want to sleep with this other character or not, and he's not sure. And that can be off-putting. It's intrusive, it's unnecessary, and it is, I think, a flaw in Murakami's writing. But if that's something that doesn't significantly affect your reading experience, I would say this is a book you'd enjoy. Now, to give some examples of what the writing can be like, some of the more adventure style writing. I race through the woods toward the east gate, determined now not to look at the wall. It is a long distance I must travel. The darkness gathers moment by moment. My balance degenerates. I stop again and again to store up the strength to persevere, to press the numbness from my nerves. I feel the visit of night. I may hear the sounding of the horn in the woods. It passes through my awareness without a trace. At last I emerge from the woods onto the bank of the river. The ground is clothed in blankness. No moon, no stars. All has been subdued by the flurries of snow. I hear the chill sound of the water, the wind taunting through the trees behind me. How much further to the library? I cannot remember. All I recall is a road along the river, leading on and on. The willows sway in the shadows, the wind whips overhead. I walk and walk, but there is no end in sight. And so that's within the end of the world. But we also have this strange introduction to the end of the world. How long am I to continue at that job? This is the narrator. How long I cannot say, answers the gatekeeper, until the right time comes. Then he selects another scrap of wood from a pile of kindling and starts whittling again. This is a poor town. No room for idle people wandering around. Everybody has a place. Everybody has a job. Yours is in the library reading dreams. You did not come here to live happily ever after, did you? Work is no hardship. Better than having nothing to do, I say. There you are, says the gatekeeper, nodding squarely as he eyes the tip of the knife. So the sooner you get to work, the better. From now on, you are the dream reader. You no longer have a name. Just like I am the gatekeeper. Understand? Understood, I say. And he is then, his eyes are, we get a quick description of how his eye, the pupil is damaged so that he will be affected by natural light in what does not seem to be a natural environment. And we'll have to be wary about being outside, but now he can read the dreams from these skulls. So it's very strange, it's very weird. And, in terms of the human consciousness, we get a description of the encyclopedia wand. The idea that if you take, if you're going to try and compile all of the information in an encyclopedia onto a matchstick or onto a toothpick, that you use a two-digit correspondence of two-digit numbers to characters. 00 is a space, A is 01, B is 02, and then so on, and then various punctuation 2 digits. And so then you just have a line of numbers with all of that and put 0 point in front of it, so it's a decimal, and then take that distance down the toothpick and make it just one tiny electron microscope style etch across it. And so we get information like that, paradoxes like that. There are unicorns. So again, it is a book that I think is one of the stronger books from Murakami. It's a book that certainly can be a gateway to the weird surrealism he's interested in, but it's not for everybody, I would add. In terms of other references, I talked about Kafka, but the book that hilariously parallels it so well would be The Condition of Secrecy, which is a series of essays on consciousness and art and being conscious artists or poets by the Danish poet and essayist Inge Christensen. And this has been fantastic to be reading alongside of Hard-Boiled Wonderland and The End of the World. Of course, you could read them separately, but the ways in which two different individuals who are writers are approaching these topics and exploring them was just really fascinating. The ways in which they combine and the ways in which they diverge. I did mention that the before the law aspect was there, and with the town within The End of the World, it feels like the opposite of the castle. If Kay never quite makes it to the castle, these people can't leave the town. And so Kafka feels like a very looming influence on Hard-Boiled Wonderland and The End of the World. Additionally, perhaps Brave New World by Aldous Huxley in some ways. I think another influence on Murakami would be The Ruined Map by Kobo Abe. Abe is more famous for Woman in the Dunes, which is an excellent and fascinating book. This might be a more readable book and more enjoyable book than Woman in the Dunes. It also has the most stunning first description. In The Ruined Map, Kobo Abe fashioned a literary crime novel that combines the narrative suspense of Chandler with the surreal imagery of Kafka and the psychological acuity of Dostoevsky. When I first met my wife in college, we were talking about books, and this was one I mentioned I was reading, and I shared that sentence, and she looks at me and goes, "So basically it's the greatest book ever written." And I said, "Well, it would be if it was those things." I may or may not be reading Kafka on the Shore by Murakami later this year. And then books that have interesting parallel narratives. Kiss of the Spider Woman by Manuel Puig, where we have characters who are sharing a prison cell, and one of them is telling basically stories from movies he's seen, which feels very Murakami. Of course, the great Hopscotch from Julio Cortázar, where you can move through the book in different ways. It's designed with at least 2 explicit ways to do that. A book that is a little bit more, I think, metafictional rather than trying to have two narratives that ultimately can parallel or merge in some way, would be If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler by Italo Calvino. From my understanding of this, I'll probably be reading this later this year. And then the ways in which we think about consciousness in terms of the end of the world or in terms of the end of a life, if we know it's occurring. I feel like that has been explored well in Compton's The Continuous Katherine Mortenhoe. So let me know if you've read other Murakami books, if you prefer other Murakami books, if you thought Hard-Boiled Wonderland was really solid as well. It's probably my favorite. If you're reading anything else by Japanese writers this June. So have a good one. Thanks.